Even if you were unaware of her name, you had seen her face 100 times. There was Kathleen Freeman everywhere. She voiced cartoon characters, made jokes in comedies, and dominated sitcoms. Even though she was only on screen for a few seconds, she had the kind of presence that made you pay attention. She constantly stole the show as the grumpy teacher, the inquisitive neighbor, and the unique maid. But as soon as she made appearances in anything from the Blues Brothers to the Beverly Hillbillies, headlines stopped mentioning her. How, therefore, could someone who was so readily identifiable and ingrained in American cinema and television just disappear from the collective consciousness? And why are so few people aware of the true events that transpired in the last phase of her life? It turns out that Freeman had a secret. In actuality, multiple ones. Behind the piercing speech and loud laugh was a very private woman who had dedicated her life to defending the things that Hollywood was never willing to acknowledge. She refused to let anyone witness her suffering and worked till the very end. And she departed the stage as silently as she had ever lived. But what about her story? That's not silent at all. It is tragic, multi-layered, and long overdue for attention. From a startling last deed to her enigmatic private life. You will be completely stunned by what happened to Kathleen Freeman. Kathleen Freeman was practically stealing moments on stage before she was stealing them in Hollywood. Freeman, who was born in Chicago in 1923, experienced show business for the first time through vaudeville. As soon as Kathleen could walk, she was thrust into the spotlight by her parents, who were entertainers. She performed musical shows and comedic routines while touring with her family, examining timing as well as performance. The kind that transformed a routine moment into a memorable one. She later started studying classical piano at the University of California, Los Angeles. She didn't belong on that meticulously cultivated musical path, though. She was drawn in by the actual stage, which was full with character, humor, and mayhem. Although she had her first movie parts in the 1940s, casting directors had taken note by the 1950s. Freeman had a unique talent. The audience would remember her even if she appeared in a scene with 5 well-known actors. Her piercing voice, rubbery facial gestures, and accurate sense of humor made her the preferred choice for secretaries, housekeepers, and inquisitive neighbors. Despite the minor roles, she had a significant impact. She appeared in numerous movies, including The Blues Brothers, where she played a strict nurse, a suspicious maid in The Fly, and a meddling helper in The Nutty Professor. Freeman managed to make the audience laugh and care despite having little screen time. But there was a price for that visibility. She was viewed by Hollywood as dependable, humorous, and one-dimensional. She was rarely given parts with emotional resonance or narrative impact and was frequently typecast. She was welcome in the industry, but only in a limited capacity. Nevertheless, she persevered. Freeman amplified what was provided to her. She has the ability to infuse even the most irritable phrases with warmth. Her vigor, timing, and ability to save a drab situation won her over many directors. However, intimate friends became aware of the toll. Freeman occasionally made jokes about being the most popular crank in Hollywood. She knew she had more to offer, even if it was obvious the repetition was getting old. However, the aspect of her that she most wanted to show off, the one that no casting agent ever saw, would remain concealed for a lot longer than anyone had anticipated. Although Kathleen Freeman was an experienced character actress by the time she met Lucille Ball, her collaboration with one of the most influential women in television thrust her into the public eye and into one of the most subtly complex professional partnerships of her career. Ball first became interested in Freeman in the late 1950s. She had the exact traits Ball valued, including a snappy delivery and a knack for comedy. Ball established her empire by surrounding herself with professionals who could keep up with her, and Freeman delivered. Ball was a pioneer in a male-dominated field. After making several appearances on I Love Lucy, she started to appear often on The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy. On screen, their chemistry was electric. Freeman typically portrayed characters who were rough, cynical, or independent-minded, who resisted Lucy's pranks, and her admirers adored it. However, things were not always that easy behind the scenes. Lucille Ball was known for her attention to detail and her demanding nature. She expected her cast to share her appreciation of order and control. Freeman was renowned for her direct honesty, even though she was equally professional. Although conflict was regular, crew members said the two respected one another. Freeman didn't flatter. The Hollywood game wasn't something she engaged in. And Ball's need to oversee every aspect occasionally conflicted with that autonomous spirit. Ball continued to bring her back, though. Freeman was just too amazing to be excluded. She had the ability to give a sluggish situation vitality. But as time went on, Freeman started to sense the boundaries. She was consistently being used, but she was never given the credit she merited. She never voiced her grievances in public. However, acquaintances later claimed that she frequently felt like a tool, valued but never recognized. Even though he significantly contributed to Ball's success, Freeman stayed in the background while he established himself as an entertainment legend. Potential, not ego, was what most irritated Freeman. She desired parts that had heart and depth. However, the scripts gave her the same loud, humorous, one-note women every time she came back. Because she was passionate about the craft, she continued to deliver and show up. With each return, however, the quiet regarding her own value became louder. Yet the aspect of her that the industry never saw, what she most desired, was still concealed and waiting beyond the curtain. Despite spending more than 50 years in front of the camera, Kathleen Freeman's private life was hardly ever included. Off-screen, she was fiercely secretive, but on-screen, she was brazen and boisterous. She didn't get married. She never discussed romances in public. Additionally, she would use a witty turn or a joke to dismiss any personal questions that interviewers might raise. However, Helen Ramsey was the moniker that silently accompanied her throughout the years. Helen was not well known. Although she didn't work in the field, she and Freeman lived together for many years. And, as friends say, a life. Some thought they were partners. They were referred to as comrades by others. Freeman didn't say. She actually didn't say a word. The two women traveled and lived together. And concealed their relationship from the public. That type of quiet was typical and frequently required in Hollywood in the middle of the 20th century. Studios had a firm hold on the image. Actors were supposed to be clean-cut, approachable, and most importantly, conventional. A career could be derailed by anything that deviated from the public's comfort zone. Freeman, a woman who had previously experienced systemic limitations in typecasting, probably recognized the price of honesty. She thereby safeguarded what was important. No announcements, interviews, or red carpets, just peaceful, private time spent behind the scenes. While some may find that depressing, others may regard it as quiet bravery. Without apology or justification, she loved who she loved. That aspect of her life was not something she did for anyone. There was no blockbuster interview, no secret diary, and no tell-all even after her death. Freeman was serious about her privacy. She then made a comment during that quiet. Not all of it has to be made public. It wasn't necessary to give up everything. Her narrative serves as a reminder of how many performers conceal their true selves out of survival rather than embarrassment. She made room for herself to live freely, albeit in seclusion. In a field that frequently pushed people into a mold, she lived on her terms. However, there was still one location where Freeman could be strong, outspoken, and completely herself without ever having to conceal. It wasn't Hollywood, either. She entered the stage late in life and fully overcame it. Most actors her age would have quietly withdrawn from the spotlight after decades of stealing scenes in movies and television shows. However, most performers weren't Kathleen Freeman. She didn't retire when Hollywood began to slow down for her, giving her fewer roles, even fewer that accomplished anything novel. She turned to the stage instead. And in the process, she rekindled her career in a surprising way. Freeman was in her mid-70s by the late 1990s. As the majority of actresses were being phased out or given only supporting parts as caregivers or grandmothers, Freeman took the stage on Broadway and made an impression on the audience. They also handed it to her. Her performance in the popular musical The Full Monty was audacious, flamboyant, and unforgettable. Freeman dominated every scene in which she played the sardonic, tough-talking rehearsal pianist Jeanette Burmeister. Her timing, edge, and voice were all specifically suited for the job. It seemed as though a character had finally been created for her soul as well as her type. The crowds burst out laughing. Her performance was hailed by critics. She also received a Tony Award nomination in 2001 for Best Featured Actress in a Musical. 78 years old. It was one of her career's high points. She had never received this acknowledgement after decades of unappreciated work and unacknowledged genius. Freeman was equally fierce behind the scenes. Her co-stars characterized her as brave, vivacious, and sharp, like lightning in a bottle. She kept everyone on their toes, teased her co-stars, and made fun of herself. However, even at almost 80, she maintained a high level of professionalism. She was always well prepared, never missed a rehearsal, and never mishandled a cue. And she carried a terrible secret with her at all times. At the time, relatively few people were aware that Freeman had been given a lung cancer diagnosis as the film was being made. She insisted on carrying on with the show and kept the news private, even from some of her closest co-workers. She was aware that leaving would mean giving up not only the part but also the last act of her life's labor. And she refused to allow that to occur. She allegedly said to a co-star, "I'm showing up as long as I can walk, talk, and make people laugh." She also did. Night after night, Freeman gave performances that will never be forgotten, despite the pain, exhaustion, and the knowledge that time was running short. The stage was more than simply a job to her. It served as a haven. No one could tell her that she was too old, too loud, or too different there. She was now able to be completely seen and celebrated there. Yet each night, despite the cheers, her health deteriorated. And it happened more quickly than anyone had anticipated when the curtain eventually dropped for the final time. Almost everyone was taken aback by Kathleen Freeman's final departure, as she had a career of making memorable goodbyes. Her charisma on stage remained unwavering despite her body battling a terrible illness behind the scenes. She arrived, struck her marks, delivered her lines with precision and punch, and made everyone laugh. No one in the full Monty, who was observing her night after night, would have suspected that she was in pain. She wanted it that way. Not only was Freeman's lung cancer diagnosis confidential, it was also kept a secret. Only a select group of close friends were informed, and even then, she played it down. She would not discuss pain. Refused to allow her last months be defined by it. It made sense for a woman who was closed off the most intimate aspects of herself for her whole life to do the same with her disease. She had no desire for sympathy. She didn't want to make the news. She desired employment. However, the toll got too high by August 2001. She skipped a performance for the first time because her enthusiasm had started to wane. Her closest friends and family were aware that something was off, but she dismissed their questions. She replied it was just a cold. "I will return." She didn't ever go back on stage. In Woodland Hills, California, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital, Kathleen Freeman died on August 23, 2001. She was 78. Her passing caused a stir among her Hollywood counterparts and the theater community. Not because she was well known, but rather because she had subtly established herself as a legend in the relevant fields. Her co-stars in Full Monty were in disbelief. Many of them were unaware that she had been ill at all. "She gave us everything and never asked for anything in return," a cast member subsequently remarked. Her passing meant more to them than simply losing a fantastic actor. It meant losing someone who had shown them what real commitment looked like. Not from national headlines or tabloids, but from other actors and filmmakers, tributes flooded in. And comedians who had collaborated with her for many years. After hearing the news, Jerry Lewis, who had starred Freeman in 11 of his movies, allegedly started crying. She had been more than just a supporting character to him. Several of his greatest humorous moments had revolved around her. However, Freeman's death little affected public awareness outside of the industry. Her decades of work were not celebrated by a media frenzy, in-depth retrospectives, or viral videos. Most people who knew how much she had given and how little she had ever received in return remembered her during her quiet funeral. Freeman could have liked that type of exit. After a lifetime of performing, there was only a silent bow, no limelight, no show. Freeman, however, continued to be undervalued even after her death, since her legacy, despite being disregarded by many, was not yet complete. The fame that Kathleen Freeman had fought so hard to achieve faded nearly completely in the years following her passing. The credits no longer included her name. Hollywood homages hardly ever featured her visage. She was not the focus of retrospective specials or documentaries. She was not recognized with lifetime achievement reels on any award shows. It seemed as though the industry had silently moved on and forgotten about her. But people continued to find Freeman's work. Even now, her visage frequently appears in repeats of vintage television programs. She can be seen in animated programs, family films, and vintage comedies. Her voice, warm, crisp, and little ridiculous, echoes like a voice you know from another room. It's a voice you may not hear right away, but once you do, you won't soon forget. However, her legacy goes beyond simple acknowledgement. Freeman stands in for a whole generation of entertainers who made Hollywood run, but who hardly ever received the credit they merited. She contributed to the cohesiveness of scenes. The spark, the timing, and the enthusiasm that transformed ordinary conversation into moments that will never be forgotten. She was the cause of a successful punchline, a seamless transition, or a laugh. However, the industry viewed her as disposable since she wasn't a leading lady, a starlet, or a headliner. That is Hollywood's memories tragedy. It is ostentatious, discriminating, and frequently cruel. The individuals who show up, put in the effort, bear the burden, and make the stars shine. Seldom are they the ones whose names endure. Among the best of them was Kathleen Freeman. Her tale makes us re-evaluate the people we honor. Do we just recall the individuals who received the largest salaries, the most media attention, and the most spectacular scandals? Or should we also pay tribute to those who dedicated decades of their lives to providing us with entertainment? Who, without ever becoming rich, made millions laugh? Freeman held a special place in the hearts of her friends and fellow actors. On your call sheet, she was the actor you always wanted. When the script didn't work out, you could rely on her to save a scene. She was the one who never took the easy road, never called in, and never arrived late. Even in the absence of observers. Perhaps that is what adds even greater impact to her legacy. She didn't request fame. She merely requested to work and to accomplish it effectively. For 50 years, she repeatedly turned up, gave birth, and moved on. Therefore, even if Hollywood might have forgotten her, we don't have to. In actuality, one way to respect the multitudes of other artists who are similar to Kathleen Freeman is to truly remember her. The humorous sidekicks and background musicians. The stars wouldn't shine nearly as brightly without the character performers who gave everything and asked for nothing. However, Freeman's tale does not just conclude with introspection. There is one more chapter left, the one that shows how Hollywood never really got her or what she had to give up to survive. Kathleen Freeman followed orders all of her life. She played the role, delivered her lines, and nailed her marks. Off, not just on screen. She rarely asked for more, gave the public what they wanted, and kept her private life discreet. Behind that well-preserved exterior, however, was a reality that Hollywood never wanted to confront and may not be prepared to do so now. For more than half a century, Freeman worked in a field that relied on her but hardly acknowledged her. She carried sequences on her back, made stars look fantastic, and made scripts funnier than they should have been. However, she was supposed to remain unnoticed, humorous, trustworthy, and inconspicuous. She sacrificed parts of herself in the process. She kept her friendship with Helen Ramsey under wraps because being honest could have cost her everything, not because it was pointless. Being overtly different was still viewed as harmful in those days. Freeman thus took the necessary action. Even as that stillness gnawed at her, she remained silent. Imagine spending decades living that way. Giving your all to your art without ever being recognized by name, loving someone passionately but never in public, and never complaining because you knew that going against the grain could result in your complete disappearance. There is more than one woman in Freeman's story. It is about every performer who led a double life to make ends meet, every artist who was never permitted to be whole in public, and every actor who put in endless hours of work but never received recognition. However, Freeman accomplished something noteworthy. She consistently produced, even without acknowledgement. Since she had faith in the job, she was a believer in laughter. And she was a firm believer in showing up at all costs. Therefore, keep in mind that the woman in the background was not background at all the next time you see her in a rerun or an old movie. The situation worked because of her. She was Kathleen Freeman, the selfless giver who never sought recognition. Perhaps it's time for her to get it at last.